Welcome to the show. I'm Michael Johnston. Joining me today is Liz Alf. Liz is the principal at Clerestory Advisors, a fee-only planning firm that serves young professional families and pre-retirees. Liz, thanks so much for joining me.
Hi, it's great to be on. Thanks for having me.
So I want to start talking about young families and serving young families. I guess I don't fall in that bucket anymore. I guess I'm not, I've got maybe a few too many gray hairs to be considered a young family, but a lot of advisors specialize. They love working with retirees or near retirees. So what attracted you to working with young families as one of the demographics that you're serving?
Yeah. So I came into this business as a career changer. I was a teacher
Hmm.
for almost 10 years prior to making this jump. And the way that I got into this is through my dad, who had started his own fee-only financial planning firm. And when I joined him, he was working predominantly with the really traditional cohort of pre-retirees that many advisors work with. And
Hmm.
I enjoy working with them, and we still work with them, and we take new clients who are pre-retirees because we think we know it well and we like it. But I started realizing I also had less gray hairs at that time, as this was 10 years ago, going on 10 years ago here. And a lot of my cohort, like friends and others who I knew who were in this age group, really were looking for financial planning services where they weren't just being sold a product.
Hmm.
That was the main entry point for a lot of them, was through like an insurance agent, where
Yeah.
the main kind of motivation was maybe more commission based. And so I started asking, my dad, and talking with him about how could we look at serving clients like myself, and now I consider myself still in that bucket. I think you would be too, who have young kids. Essentially, are
Yep.
a lot of our clients. They're dealing with the competing forces of childcare costs, trying to manage their time and enjoyment of things they want to do now versus things they might want to do later in retirement, and sort of how to prioritize those things and make the best of what they have going on now, and then adapt, as time goes on. And
Yeah.
there just wasn't a lot at that time. There was even less, I think, folks who were doing that. I think it's thankfully becoming a little more common. But that's how we kind of got into it, and where the motivation to work with those folks came from.
Yeah. And I have to imagine too that in a way you kind of have more, you can have more leverage or greater impact, right? Like if
Yep.
you're at, very close to retirement, the cake is mostly baked, right? Like
Yep.
you can make some little tweaks around the edges here, but you don't have your kind of peak earning years. In a way, if you're able to get the folks early and start working with folks early and kind of help them establish some best practices, I have to imagine you have the ability to potentially have a huge impact on their financial trajectory, which I imagine is satisfying both personally and professionally too.
Most definitely. I think that was one of the big deciders when we were trying to figure out if this could work, was exactly as you said it. The cake is usually 90% baked by the time we get, depending on how prior to retirement folks are coming to us.
Hmm.
Kind of, you can't make something out of nothing. On our end, we can help people optimize and do appropriate distribution planning, have a really good gauge on what they actually can spend, make some
Yep.
of those decisions, but you can't turn back the clock.
Hmm.
And so, you see those people come to you who aren't ready for that and say, well, what could have happened 10, 15, 20 years before that would have gotten them there? Um, and that's where we realized, some of these folks who are coming to us in their 30s, they would be the clients we really enjoy taking on at 55, if not even in a better position, right?
Right.
Hopefully, if they start working with us now. So how can we figure out a way to be able to do that, on our end as an advisor? So yeah, exactly that.
Yeah, I mean I stay up at night, not literally, but it pains me to think about as a younger person some of the mistakes that I made. And by mistakes, I mean things that I missed out on. Things like when I was running my own business, not contributing to a solo 401k and not maxing out
Right.
certain
Yeah.
accounts. And I say this as someone with a finance degree, someone who's a CFA charter holder. And I made all these mistakes. And looking back on it, I kick myself, but like you kind of said, there's nothing I can do about my missed Roth IRA contribution in
Right.
2012
Yeah.
at this
I
point, right?
know. Exactly. And
Yeah.
it's and to your point too, I think, and we can't, especially with the young family, I think demographic that we've been working with, they usually have a lot of competing priorities. So we can't do
Mm,
everything, but it's trying to show them, well, here are your options, right? Here's the
yeah.
things you can do. And then what are the priorities, that they've set? And so what of those options is going to get them closer to those priorities? And how do you kind of get some of everything? Because, not some folks, it wouldn't make sense to come, to do the maximum to say a solo 401k, but maybe opening the account and doing partial funding is going to
Yep.
help keep them on track and, on their pathway and get them in a good spot. But they also want to do like a fun vacation now with their family because they don't want to wait till they're 65, because we see those folks too. And, sometimes when you wait that long, you don't know how much time you have and how much
Yeah.
health you're going to have at that point to enjoy it. So doing some balancing of both those things. But yeah, you're
Sure.
right. I have the same thoughts, and I grew up with a CPA and eventual financial planner in my house. So
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, not a novel idea, the sense that there's a need for much greater financial literacy in this country, I think in general, or an opportunity to help out young folks. But it really is remarkable. Just I think Albert Einstein said that compounding returns are the eighth wonder of the
yeah.
world. And if you start doing these things relatively young, in your 20s and 30s, to the extent you can, it really potentially has a massive impact. I want to go back and ask about, you mentioned your journey, which is a little bit unique. You started off as a teacher, and
Yeah.
you kind of alluded to the fact that that gave you, insight into what it felt like to be a young professional.
Yeah.
Are there other, I guess, takeaways or lessons or skills you feel like you took from your career in education that have translated to your practice now?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest one is working with a wide variety of people,
Mm,
and personalities, because a lot of this business, at least that I've learned at this point, is really, it's very relationship and trust based,
yeah.
and also the right fit for the style of firm you are and personality, I think, that you're interacting with, because we are not the right advisors for every client that comes our way, and vice versa probably.
Mm,
But being able to kind of appropriately read the folks that we interact with, try to listen to them and actually hear their real concerns and priorities, not just what we think, fits on to them, given their age and faith. Um, and and trying to ask as much as we can the right questions, of them, to get out what we need to try to help partner with them to meet their goals, and to do that in the way that we know might be most advantageous for them. All those things were things that we sort of did on a different scale and different content, I suppose. Working with, I taught high schoolers, so working with teenagers. So
yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
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 and then the second piece of that, of your kind of career trajectory, is you worked with your father, I believe, for a while. You kind of
did,
became
yes.
a partner with him, and then you took over. So
Yep.
I imagine that well, I don't know, may have been frustrating at times. I imagine that's a tremendous opportunity, though, to get to learn the ropes from someone
It is.
with whom you have a tremendous amount of trust and love.
Yeah, I was very fortunate, and we both were, because it was what he wanted to
Mm,
happen, I think. But he was looking for some support at a time that I was looking to transition out of teaching. And I think he didn't think I would necessarily have a strong interest, but I said, I really like the aspect of working with people, that I do enjoy that. And so that translates well into this profession. But I also like the technical knowledge and background skills. I was a science major, and had taught science, and did a lot of math work.
hmm
And so I enjoyed that kind of learning. And so we ended up starting that out to see if this might work out as a transition plan for him. And that was the end goal, was that I would be a succession plan for him when he went to retire, if this all worked out, as we hoped it would. And so learning from him, and learning how he interacted with clients, and the way he approached different problems. And also I learned a ton from him, because I had no knowledge about running a business,
Mm,
um, and how to do that. And and just the things that go along with that. And it's actually been also impactful, I think, working with some of the young family clients, because several of them run their own business. And so I've been able to kind of also give them, I call loose, like business consulting and or recommendations of things they could follow up on outside of,
Sure.
our relationship.
Yeah. A more, I guess, holistic um,
Yeah. Yeah.
service offering that you're able to offer there. So we've talked a little bit about young families. I feel like the kind of the idea that lots of folks have here, probably for good reason, is that the younger generation, it's pretty tough right now in a lot of ways. Things got very
Yep.
expensive. It's very hard to buy a house.
Yep.
Can you give us a more, is there an optimistic side of that? Are there things that make it great to be a young professional family right now that, maybe we don't hear about because it's not the fear porn that draws clicks or that draws eyeballs or attention? But,
Yeah.
for your clients,
Yeah.
is there a kind of a reason to be optimistic and positive about the future and be hopeful about being a young family right now from a financial perspective or otherwise?
Yeah. I think a lot of I mean, yes, there's certainly have been challenges, especially in housing,
Hmm.
last 2 years have been tough in general for people considering making a move, right, or getting a mortgage for the first time. But I mean, I think if you talk, like, I know my dad gave me this perspective because I'm not quite old enough to have this perspective. But, there was a period in the late 70s, early 80s that was, it's much worse from a getting a loan standpoint than
Yeah.
we're going through right now. We had it just really good for a while in terms of, what we were experiencing. So, in relative perspective, it feels a lot worse. But we kind of, we all it we his throughout history, we've sort of gone through cycles, I think. So trying to give people one just reframe perspective on what can we control, right? Which
Hmm.
is, what are your priorities? What is important to you? What are you trying to plan for in the future? And then what tools do you have at your disposal, which is one, through jobs, if people are W-2 folks, how they're approaching that. Because there are a lot of opportunities, I think, out there right now. And we work with a fair amount of pretty well compensated folks who do have really good ways to put away more for retirement, right? And, for the long term. There's a lot more variety of advantage savings plans too currently that didn't necessarily exist. I mean, we talk with the 60-year-old clients all the time saying, well, we didn't have a Roth 401k
Yeah.
option when I should have been using a Roth
Yeah.
401k, right? They couldn't do that. That didn't exist, 30 years ago. So when they were at the tax bracket to want to take advantage of it. And so these are things we can kind of help point out to folks now, in like 529 plans, and ways to save for education that are, more favorable and tax advantage. So there are tools at their disposal. So I think the vast majority of clients that we work with, there are things that are stress points, like planning for education costs, knowing that
Yep.
those have been inflating at a not very sustainable rate. I do think that's going to have to change at some point. I don't know when and how exactly, but it's gonna have to. Um, and other, this housing certainly is very stressful, I think, for folks, but there are also a lot of opportunities to save and put money away in tax advantaged, vehicles that we can try to help them strategize around, I think, and prioritize to set themselves up to be able to make choices later in life, or have more choices and options later in life.
Yeah. I think those are all great points, especially around, yeah, the Roth hasn't been around all that long. I think it was 97 or 98 that it was introduced. And then also kind of that perspective. I've heard the same thing too from my parents. I think at one point they had a 15 or 18% mortgage,
Yes,
something like that, which
we
is,
had same at ours. Yeah,
yeah,
that's the
which is,
feedback I got. I said, oh yeah, I guess that would be worse. So
yeah, yeah. Which is mind-boggling, but yeah, these things change and we go through cycles, and it's a great point too, just about having all these tools available, and also having the information, whether it's through a professional or another resource, available to help you kind of understand and maximize and optimize all of these tools. For some previous generations, it was pretty difficult to even understand what was out there and the
yeah,
limited tools that were out there, right?
yes. I
Mhm.
think that's the pro and the con of right now, is there's almost too much information sometimes for people. Um,
Totally agree.
really hard to sort out what's good and not good information, or what's most important for them.
Yeah, what's
Not,
actually going to move the
yeah,
needle versus what's going to save you
yeah,
$12 20 years down the road,
exactly.
right?
And it's not worth their time, right?
Yeah.
Fuss around with it. So, yeah,
Yeah, I totally agree with you. The problem is in some ways is not that there's too little information. It's that there's way too much, and kind of
yeah,
sorting through that noise can be challenging. And on top of that, the tax code is kind of a Frankenstein that gets, twisted and a new thing bolted on every year. And again,
yeah,
even for someone who's got a finance degree and thinks of himself as pretty financially savvy, keeping track of what solar incentive is there this year now, or that it can almost feel like a full-time job, especially if you want to do it correctly. So
yeah. Oh, for sure. Well, and we're potentially about to revert to prior tax laws in 2 years. So
yeah. Yeah,
we keep saying, well, it might be like this, it might not. We'll approach it and we'll figure it out when it comes and then readjust, right? Because
yeah,
that's just how this stuff goes. But yeah.
yeah. So I want to go back to something you mentioned at the beginning and kind of dive into it because I think it's really important, and that's fees. And you
Yep.
mentioned, when you were younger, and a lot of your friends were being contacted, or they were working with folks who were compensated primarily through commissions. Can you just, for anyone who's kind of unfamiliar with this issue at a high level, kind of zoom out and maybe explain the issue with commission-based compensation versus the fee-only structure that
Yeah.
you and a lot of other advisors have gone to now?
Yeah. So technically folks can be in this industry, I think, can be commission only. They can be fee based. Fee based means that part of their income is coming from commissions and part is direct fee from clients. And
Mm-hmm.
that's very confusing language, I think, because then there's fee only. So, I think that's it's a little hard to keep track of. And fee only, in our definition means that we only receive compensation directly from clients. We don't sell any product.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that does mean we cannot sell folks life insurance policies. We have to recommend them, go see a broker and get policies because we don't do that here, because the insurance is pretty much a commission only business. And so like you will have to engage with that if you want to get insurance. And that's the way it works. And that's all right. It is what it is. I think the issue sometimes becomes that then insurance gets conflated with also financial planning, gets conflated with investment advice. When sometimes it's maybe better suited to separate those things for their own individual purposes and then get compensated in the way that makes the most sense, for that type of advice. So we are fee only and just charge clients directly for the advice that we give, and planning work and investment management work that we do for clients.
Mm-hmm. And I think the issue with anything that's commission based is that potentially you get misaligned incentives, right? If you're working with an advisor who essentially makes money if they sell you a product, or if they open a new account, or if they hit whatever metric. I think in anything, whether it's working with a financial advisor, working with business partners, kind of the idea of aligning incentives is really important because we're human beings, right? People respond to incentives. And to the extent that you can kind of align your incentives with your clients, that
Yeah.
is usually a win-win for everyone.
Yeah, and that's part of what's tricky in this industry is um clients having the ability to know that the advice they're getting is hopefully not being influenced by how the advisor is getting compensated. And as you said, it's easier, I think, naturally in a commission-based, framework for that to skew the advice that's being given because that's how you're getting compensated versus if you know that a client is paying you a flat regular fee, you're not worried about is it be better for me from a business and revenue perspective to try to, talk about this or this solution for whatever it is they're looking to do. It's really about I can divorce myself from that and just say what's best for the client, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah. I have a couple more questions for you here, Liz.
Yeah.
One, I want to get the backstory of your firm's name, Clerestory
Yeah.
Advisors. It's a
Yes.
bit of a unique name and a good story behind it. So, how did, I think it was your dad who originally came up with it? What's the story behind the name?
Yeah, my dad did name the firm, and my brother is an architect, so I think that was kind of the thing that I don't know, piqued his interest at the time that my dad named the firm, because Clerestory is an architectural term. It means a window that is high up and lets light in. And the whole, kind of tie to financial planning was supposed to be that in theory, we're hoping to help folks shed light, and cast light on their financial picture, give them clarity, so that they can make, the best decisions, for themselves. But it's a not a well-known term necessarily, so we usually have to explain it to people.
Well, I think it's a great analogy because I think if for folks who aren't don't have a deep financial background, it can feel like you're walking around in the dark, right? And then
Yeah.
like you sit down with the right person, you get connected with the right advisor, and it feels like someone flipped on the switch and you can like finally see everything and you say, like, thank goodness this all like I've got someone to help me make sense
Yeah.
of this now. I've been stumbling around here and now I can see. So I don't know if that's what he had in mind, but I certainly
I
think
think
that's
I think that was his bent, and I liked it. I just always go, it's usually a point of explanation for people. Because a lot of firms, as we all know, are kind of, the names of the people who own the,
right.
LLC. So
Yep.
or advisors,
Yep.
which he didn't intentionally want, even though it's funny, we are a family business and he transitioned to me. So we could have done that and it would have still had continuity, but
So my last question for you, Liz, people
yeah.
want to learn more about you. They want to learn more about Clerestory. Where can they
Yeah.
go?
I mean, I think the main place would be Clerestory, our website, clerestoryadvisors.com. It's got a lot of information on there about kind of our services, how we work. And I've got an associate advisor with me and a client services person. So they're on there as well, Joe and Cindy, and their information and, my bio and all that good stuff. We're also NAPFA members, which is the National Association of Personal Financial Advisors. And that's a group of, it's all fee-only advisors and RIAs. And so we're members there and on, all their site materials. And then, and like there's another one that's cropped up in last 10 years or so, the fee only advisors network. So, we're part of them because we're pretty heavily embedded, as probably you can tell, in the fee only community.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you can't say that enough. I'm a big fan of that model. I think
Yeah.
is the, it's gained a lot of momentum, and I think to the extent that
Yeah.
it continues to gain momentum, it's great for investors. It kind of helps to improve outcomes for retail investors, and in my mind, that's a great thing. So
Yeah.
you're welcome to say fee only on the
Okay. As
show
many
as much
times
as
as
you
I
like. So
can. Yeah,
yeah.
for sure.
Well, we will make sure that there are links to all of those in the show notes for this episode. Liz, thank you for coming on, sharing a little bit of your unique story and your thoughts here. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Michael.